My girlfriend cheated with her boss, and our friends knew I walked away. She tried to ruin me, but karma struck back. They lost everything. This morning, my phone exploded with 32 missed calls. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. The indicators were there, spread like breadcrumbs during the final months of our relationship. But after 3 years with someone, you tend to give them the benefit of the doubt. At least, that's what I was telling myself. It began with tiny things. Allison started working late more frequently, which is not uncommon during busy seasons. But then came the new perfume I didn't recognize, clothes I'd never seen before appearing in our wardrobe, and her phone suddenly becoming this hallowed object that was always within arm's reach. I've never been the jealous kind, but something felt strange. When I attempted to hug her from behind while she was texting, she would move away. How she'd walk out to accept calls, while stating they were work-related. The frequent girls' nights with folks whose names I had never heard before. Last Tuesday, as I was folding clothes, her phone lit up on the coffee table. A message preview from someone named Jay appeared. I miss you already. Last night, the rest was cut off, but my stomach sank. I didn't want to be the person who snoops through his girlfriend's phone, but the universe appeared to be telling me to wake up. When she arrived home that night, I decided to be direct. She was in the kitchen, preparing a smoothie as if nothing were wrong. The sound of the blender filled our flat as I leaned against the doorframe to watch her. "Who's Jay?" I inquired as she finally switched it off. Her posture changed instantly. Her shoulders stiffened, but then she did something unexpected. She smiled. She smiled coldly and almost triumphantly, rather than her customary warmth. "Wondering when you'd finally catch on, Michael," she remarked, taking a sip from her glass. "Jay's my boss. And yes, I've been sleeping with him for the past 2 months." The nonchalant manner in which she said it felt like a slap. No guilt, no humiliation, only pride. "I needed a real man," she added, smirking. "Someone who knows what he wants and goes for it. Not someone who spends his weekends playing video games with Jacob and watching stupid movies." I stood there, pondering her words. After 3 years together, is this how she truly saw me? Through the shock, I felt something else rise. Not rage, but an odd sense of clarity. "Does Chloe know?" I inquired, remembering our mutual buddy who had introduced us. "Oh, she's known for weeks," Allison said, laughing. "Most of our friends know. They understand. Jay can actually provide a future, not just dreams and excuses." That stung harder than the cheating admission. These folks, with whom we'd shared birthdays, holidays, and many dinners, had all been watching this, most likely laughing behind my back. I took out my phone and entered the group chat with Jacob and Chloe. "Is that true? Did you all know?" Jacob's response arrived swiftly. "Bro, you're fantastic, but Allison deserves someone more experienced. Don't take this personally." Chloe joined in. "We did not mean to hurt you, but perhaps this is the wake-up call you need." I looked up from my phone to see Allison observing me with the same smirk on her lips. She was hoping for an explosion, drama, and a scene she could tell everyone about later. Poor, immature. Michael is losing his calm. Instead, I smiled. A genuine smile that appeared to catch her off guard. Without saying anything, I walked to our bedroom, dug out my go bag and grabbed my laptop and keys. Allison was staring at me as I walked back through the kitchen, her smirk weakening slightly. "Where are you going?" she questioned. "Out," I answered simply. "And Allison, keep the apartment. I'm sure Jay can help with the rent." I heard her begin to say something as I closed the door behind me, but I didn't pause to listen. My phone was already vibrating with text, most likely from our so-called pals, attempting to justify themselves. As I drove away, I turned off my phone and felt something unexpected relief. Sometimes losing everything reveals what you never had in the first place. Update 1. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone who responded to my previous post. I never anticipated it to blow up like that. A lot has happened in the last week, and I'm still absorbing it. I've been staying in a modest motel on the outskirts of town. It's not the most glamorous place, but it's clean, and the owner, an older man named Pete, appears to be a nice guy. He even reduced the weekly rent by $20 after hearing my story. I turned on my phone after 2 days of silence, 32 missed calls, and 47 text messages. The majority were from Allison, some from Jacob and Chloe, and a few from numbers I didn't recognize. What drew my attention, however, was the social media notification storm. Allison had been busy, very busy. Her Instagram story depicted a picture that I scarcely recognized. Apparently, I was a controlling, jealous boyfriend who watched her every movement. According to her posts, I emotionally tortured her for years, cut her off from friends, and threw a violent tantrum when she finally stood up for herself. Each post received hundreds of sympathetic responses, including some from people I thought were friends. What about the crown jewel? In a sad video, she claimed I had financially mistreated her by forcing her to divide all of our bills, $50.50, while I hoarded my money. Rich, considering she earned more than I did, and insisted on the arrangement herself. Then came a text from Gemma, a coworker I'd known for years. Hey, you might want to check your email. Something's going around the office about you. Sure enough, there was a company-wide email about creating a safe workplace environment with a thinly veiled reference to recent troubling activities by specific workers. There were no names stated, but the timing was hardly subtle. I should have become angry. Perhaps I should have pushed back and shared my side of the story. Instead, I was curious. How far would she go? It turns out to be quite far. Yesterday, I went to our local coffee shop, which I assumed would be safe because Allison despised their coffee. Wrong. The barista, who had usually been kind, gave me a look as if I had attached to her shoe. Later, I discovered Allison had become a regular, telling her survival story with everyone who would listen. But this is where things become interesting. While retrieving some things from storage, I ran upon Juliana, Allison's alleged best friend. She appeared uneasy, peering around as if she was worried about being spotted chatting to me. You need to be careful, she said quietly. Jay isn't just her boss. His wife, she's connected. Like, really connected. And Allison's been telling her you're unstable, dangerous even. Why are you telling me this? Juliana's gaze flashed around again. Because this isn't the first time. Before you, there was another guy at work. Allison and Jay, they did the same thing to him. He ended up leaving town. That talk altered everything. I spent the night researching legal records, social media, whatever I could discover. It turns out, the preceding man existed. Mark something. Allison disappeared totally from social media around the time she started at the company. This morning, I received a call from our landlord. Allison attempted to remove my name from the lease, alleging I had abandoned the property. When it didn't work, she informed him that I had been threatening her. He called to warn me. It turned out his sister had gone through something similar years before. But here's the real kicker. During all of this, I received a message request on Instagram from an account I did not recognize. The profile image was of a woman in her 40s, elegantly dressed and wearing costly jewelry. The message was simple. I believe we should discuss my husband and your girlfriend. Coffee tomorrow. It was signed by Mrs. J. I'm meeting her in an hour. Something tells me Allison's true guy story is going to get a lot more complicated. The weird thing is, watching Allison create this sophisticated web of lies and seeing our friends take sides based solely on her word is very liberating. Every hateful message, every phony tear, and every fabricated narrative only reinforces what I already knew. I am not losing anything worth keeping. Update 2. Sorry for the delayed update. The last 2 weeks have been crazy. What about the coffee meetup with Mrs. J? Game changer. It turns out that she's been accumulating evidence for months, not only about Allison and her husband, but about a larger pattern of behavior inside the corporation. Remember how Juliana mentioned the person who had left town? He was not the first. Mrs. J has documented at least 3 similar incidents in the previous 5 years, with young employees becoming connected with her husband and then assisting in the removal of anyone who could expose them. What is the difference this time? Mrs. J had finished playing quietly. She had texts, emails, expense records, and security footage from the workplace parking garage. But she wanted one more thing: public visibility. This is where the yearly corporate party came in. I didn't intend to attend. Why would I? Mrs. J had other ideas. Sometimes, she reminded me, the best retribution is simply letting people show their true colors. The party was held at a luxury downtown hotel. I arrived late and dressed nicer than I ever had on these occasions. What were the glances I got when I stepped in? Priceless. Allison almost dropped her drink. Jay's face changed from red to white so quickly that I thought he'd pass out. But here's the best part. I didn't have to do anything. Chloe approached first, obviously tipsy. "You've got some nerve showing up here," she mumbled, loud enough for adjacent groups to hear. "After everything you put Allison through." I just smiled. "Everything I put her through? That's interesting. Tell me more." That was when Gemma walked in. Remember her? My coworker? She'd been quietly gathering her own evidence. Screenshots of Allison talking about her escapades in business chat groups. Recordings of her discussing how to spin the narrative with Jay. Actually, Gemma said, "I think we'd all like to hear the real story." The following hour was like watching dominoes fall. Mrs. J arrived precisely on time, tablet in hand. The projector mistakenly began presenting a slideshow of embarrassing messages and photographs. Allison's increasingly desperate attempts to preserve control of her narrative. Jacob, however, put on the real show. Good old bros come before hoes, except when the hoe can help my career. Jacob. He'd been photographing everything with his phone, intending to present it to Jay later to prove his loyalty or something. Instead, he captured Allison's entire tantrum. "You think you're so clever," she was screaming at me. "You and that bitter old woman, trying to ruin everything I've built. Jay loves me. We're going to have a life together." Mrs. J chose to share the cherry on top. Divorce paperwork already filed. It turned out that Jay had promised Allison the same future that he had promised the other employees. Same script, but different actress. What is the best part? Throughout this, I rarely spoke. I just watched years of manipulation and falsehoods unravel in real time. Juliana, who had been quiet throughout the evening, eventually spoke up. "I helped her," she said, addressing the now quiet chamber. "I helped her destroy that other guy's reputation. I can't do it again." By midnight, the party had effectively ended. Allison stormed out, mascara running down her face. Jay was confined in his office with HR. What about those friends who were so willing to trust her stories? They couldn't look me in the eyes as I left. Mrs. J grabbed my arm. "Thank you," she said, "for being the one who didn't run." I drove home to my motel room, feeling surprisingly calm. Pete was still awake, watching late-night television in the office. He took one look at my face and smiled. "Good night? You could say that?" This morning, my phone blew up again, this time in a different tone. Apologies, explanations. People claim they never truly trusted Allison's stories. I even received a note from Mark, the person who left town. Apparently, he has been following everything via mutual ties. Sometimes, karma doesn't require our assistance, it only requires an audience. Final update. This is it. The final chapter of this drama, and believe me, it has been an incredible ride. You may want to get some popcorn for this one. First and foremost, The fallout from the workplace party was more severe than anyone had anticipated. Within 48 hours, Jay and Allison were asked to quit, but that was only the beginning. Remember the documents Mrs. J had collected? It turns out there was more. Much more. Jay had fabricated all of his expense reports to disguise his business dinners with Allison. Every correspondence in which they planned against fellow colleagues. Each falsified performance review. She gave it all to the board of directors. The company's legal team worked extremely quickly. They were more concerned with the trend of workplace harassment and financial malfeasance than with the affairs themselves. Both Jay and Allison are currently facing civil litigation. But this is where things become interesting. Remember Mark, the guy who skipped town? He came back, and he brought receipts. Literally and figuratively. It turns out he documented everything before he left, including the smear campaign Allison and Jay launched against him. He didn't know what to do with, at all, until now. Mrs. J introduced him to her lawyer. 3 days later, he brought his own complaint. Then something lovely occurred. Other former employees began coming forward, each with their own story and evidence. What began as a single scandal suddenly became an avalanche. Allison attempted to get ahead of it. She uploaded an emotional video in which she claimed to be the true victim, having been duped by Jay and is now being persecuted. That's when Juliana developed a spine. She shared images of their private chats, in which Allison boasted about her escapades and plotted to harm people's reputations, the ones in which she insulted her victims. Allison visited my motel last week. Pete, the owner, called me at work. That girl you told me about? She's making a scene in the parking lot. I took my time driving home. I found her sitting on the hood of my car, mascara streaked and clutching a manila envelope. I have dirt on everyone, she stated, attempting to sound scary despite her wavering voice. If you don't help me stop this, I'll release it all. I just chuckled. Go ahead. Burn every bridge you have left. See how that works out. She flung the envelope at me. Inside were images, screenshots, and private messages, which she had accumulated over years of influencing others. Her insurance policy. I photographed every single page while she watched. Then I handed it back to her. Release whatever you want. But first, look at where your previous schemes got you. What about folks like Allison? They cannot stand when their weapons are used against them. She ripped up the envelope right there in the parking lot, shouting about how we'd all regret it. Was that a tantrum? Someone recorded it. Within a few hours, it had spread over social media. The ultimate blow occurred yesterday. Mrs. J's divorce was final, and guess what? She received everything? The house? The autos? Most of their assets. Jay's golden parachute from his company? Gone to pay legal fees. What's his reputation? Destroyed? What are his future professional prospects? Let's just say, Google is no longer his friend. How about Allison? According to what I've heard, she's returning to live with her parents in another state. Her social media has gone dark. Those that sided with her, they are dealing with their own fallout. It turns out that backing the wrong horse has consequences. Jacob attempted to apologize yesterday. I sent him a long note on how he could have been a better friend. I simply responded with a screenshot of his previous messages supporting Allison. He stopped me. Coward. Chloe is also conducting damage control. She is concerned that the screenshots Allison saved may have an impact on her own career. I almost feel bad. Almost. Me? I just signed a lease for a new apartment. I got a promotion at work. It's funny how removing poisonous people improves things. And yes, I'm seeing someone new. Taking it slowly. Doing things correctly. Plotting and scheming are not the best ways to exact revenge. It's living well while allowing people to harm themselves. But I will not lie. It's been really pleasant to watch everything burn. This will be my final update. Thank you for joining along for the ride, Reddit. Remember, karma doesn't need your help. Sometimes you just have to step aside and let folks show their true colors. My boyfriend wants more intimacy, but it's exhausting me. How do I talk to him about it and find a balance? Original post. My boyfriend and I have been together for 2 years now. He is my first relationship and even my first kiss. We met at university during activities, became friends, and then started dating. He is so polite and kind, and also really sweet and smart as well. We can talk about our common interests and hobbies for hours on end. Since I was a virgin in the relationship, he was not. We took it slow and only had sex when I was ready, which was about 8 months after we became a couple. After that, we had sex about once every 1 or 2 weeks, depending on if we found the time during our studies and if we were exhausted. Sometimes during exam time, we had it once a month or every 5 weeks. But slowly, he started to initiate more and more. At first, I didn't mind and loved the attention he was giving me. I felt attractive and beautiful, which helped my body image issues a lot. Soon it turned into him asking for it every single day, sometimes twice a day during weekends, or if we have a slow day with little work and studies. A month ago, we went on a vacation together, and he basically jumped on me as soon as we got into our hotel room. We barely got to do anything as he wanted to have sex 2, if not 3 times a day. I came back so exhausted from the vacation. I even started saying no to him eating me out, or role play or switching in position, just to get it over with sooner. At this point, sex does nothing for me anymore. The mere action and physical stimulation feels enjoyable, yes. But just sex, without anything else, just isn't worth the time or effort for me. I need a story and emotion with it. Lots of dirty talk and role playing in some hot situations. I know that takes time and effort to prepare, but it gets me going wildly. But even if I could have that every day, I wouldn't want it. It's literally physically too exhausting. Also, I feel like too much sex kinda destroys the magic. I know that he takes a lot emotionally and sexually out of sex. It's making him feel loved and desired, and I don't want to take it from him. But I actually caught myself don't doing any makeup anymore, and not wearing tight or short clothing but baggy ones instead, to maybe deter him from wanting sex so much. TLDR, my boyfriend started initiating sex more and more. I find it exhausting, and can't take it anymore. How do I negotiate fewer sexual encounters without making him feel unloved? Update. I spend a lot of time reading through everyone's replies and looking inwards about how I feel. I gathered my thoughts and spent a few days making a list of what I wanted to say when we had the big conversation. On a weekend when we had planned to spend the day together, I sat him down and told him the following points. I love him to the moon and back, and want to show him that I love him, make him feel desired, loved and appreciated. But having so much sex with such frequency is physically exhausting to me, which causes me to avoid sex and even sex acts I enjoy because I don't have enough energy and motivation to do it. This also causes me to orgasm not as often anymore. I also need time to physically recover before it may even start to become painful. I feel like sex has become the single defining aspect of our relationship, and many other parts like doing activities together, romantic dates, just talking and cuddling have taken a back seat. I also feel exhausted emotionally and underappreciated from giving as much as I can, which I gladly do for the people I love, while little comes back from the other side of the relationship. I then proceeded to explain the things I like during sex and what makes me go wild, hoping to show him that I still want to have sex with him. I also made a few more compliments just to keep the vibe positive, and because I meant it. He reacted pretty well, all things considered. He listened and let me finish, but asked for a little time to think about it. Obviously, I gladly agreed. We spend the rest of the day together without him initiating once. At the end of the day, he said that he wants me to enjoy sex just as much as he does, and that he loves me. I was really hopeful for the next week and a half. We spent our time together like usual, and he asked for sex about one half as often as before our talk. We even had days without sex at all. He also started to ask, "Do you want to have sex with me?" Instead of physically initiating like he did before, like touching me somewhere, hugging me from behind, and similar things. He also stopped asking for pictures of me, and when he did it, were just selfies. I was so happy that I even took the initiative once, and he seemingly loved it when I asked for sex. Then one day he sat me down with a stern look and said that he hated what this relationship has turned into. To him, it feels like we are now just roommates or platonic friends instead of lovers. He told me that the one time I initiated, after he was overjoyed to finally fuck me again. His heart was broken because I suddenly wasn't as submissive as usually. I asked to be eaten out and was on top with some more dominant dirty talk, and that all of that is not what he signed up for. He doesn't want to walk on eggshells waiting for me when I'm finally in the mood, but has what he deserves in the relationship. Basically, he gave me an ultimatum. Either we return to how it was before the talk starting right now, or he leaves me. Guess who doesn't have a boyfriend anymore? I spent the last few days bawling my eyes out and eating lots of ice cream and watching some shitty shows. What he said hurt me a lot, and I do not love him anymore, but still, the feeling of loss and sadness is all too real. He was my first relationship, and for the past 2 years, he was my entire world. No, I have to gather up the broken shards he left behind. Told her, I took your advice and talked with him about my feelings. He pretended to be okay with it for a while, and then left me after demanding more sex again. OP added more info in the comments. Comment 1. I have an update if you want more information. I have a pretty high libido as well, and I love good sensual sex, and I want it quite often, as I can go multiple times a week. But it was so often that we basically didn't do anything else besides it. And he was emotionally checked out when the possibility of sex wasn't on the table. It was so much that I was physically uncomfortable. Not to mention his really bad behavior once I told him I wanted a break sometimes. I had difficulty saying no because I wanted to make him feel loved that way, until I realized that he just wants to take everything he wants from me without giving any emotional connection, romance, or care for me as a person. I hate that people throw around this sexual incompatibility argument, because if he said he wanted someone he can fuck at least 2 a day anyway, he likes, and I can't, and don't want to do that, that would be one thing. But he shouted at me, demanded we do it how he likes it, and that I apologize for ruining everything by voicing my concerns for my well-being. He also said that he deserves to just take everything he wants from me. So please keep that in mind when you do your judgment. Yes. We are not together anymore. I cut him off after his scary tantrum. Comment 2. Thank you for your empathy and for the added context. I know that my update gave more information, but that's also because I didn't see a lot of the stuff he did to me and didn't do for me after that tantrum. Until that point, I wanted to give everything to him because I was head over heels for him, until he showed me that he didn't feel that way back. I get it. I like sex just as much as the next gal. It's just that I have a pretty broad spectrum of frequency I would be okay with depending on what my partner feels like. Sex once a week or 2 weeks? Totally fine, as long as the other intimacy is fulfilled. Sex every other day. Great as well, as long as it's an equal relationship, and we both get what we want, and non-sexual intimacy isn't pushed to the side, which sadly happened to me. In the end, I not only felt really sore and exhausted, but also used and reduced my body. If we broke up because of sexual incompatibility, that would still hurt, but we could part ways amicably. This way, He just hurt me for no reason. Comment 3. I get that sexual incompatibility can be a huge deal breaker for people. But firstly, it's not like we suddenly were not having any sex anymore. In those 10 days between our two conversations, we still had sex about 5, 6 times. Plus making out, plus some other sexual stuff, besides full-on PIV. Also, it's the way he treated me. He shouted at me, demanded we return to normal by having sex as often as he wants again, no matter my feelings, and with me being submissive. He also demanded an apology and an apology session. So much could be inferred. But before all that, for the last weeks and months, he left me emotionally starved. He only looked out for his sexual gratification, while I had to cherish the few little drops of romance, friendship, and companionship. When it didn't involve sex or could lead to sex, he was kinda emotionally distant. Cute dates, cuddling and intimacy, without sexuality and hobbies together, was few and far in between. I don't fault him for not wanting sex. I fault him for how he treated me and how little he was able to compromise. I caught my wife cheating after 20 years of love, so I confronted her affair partner and ended his marriage. Now my life is in shambles. I didn't notice the signs that were there. Here are a handful that come to mind. She began sending strange late-night texts. She frequently went out for drinks with her pals. I was happy that she was being friendly, even if this was not her usual behavior. She attended yoga once a week, but it appears that she was not compensated because she assisted with setup and cleanup, and the instructor was one of her coworkers. In my opinion, she was also quite rigid for someone who practiced yoga. Callers who are unknown hang up. If we were near each other's phones, we would frequently answer them. She had an unidentified caller on multiple occasions who would end the conversation as soon as I responded. Although we received a lot of spam calls, the calls were typically from telemarketers or debt collectors trying to locate the number's prior owner. It's rarely a hang-up. I was not expected to return until tonight because I work out of town. Tomorrow was our scheduled departure for a 2-week road trip. I came home yesterday afternoon because work was sluggish. Since we've been so busy this summer with family and friends, this trip was meant to offer us some alone time. I didn't recognize the truck in my driveway when I got home. Recently, my neighbor inquired about my opinion of the new truck, but I assumed he was wrong and didn't give it much thought. I had a horrible instinct as soon as I saw the truck. The feeling was there, and it was powerful, even though I loved and trusted my wife. I crept to the window of our bedroom on the side of the house. It was open, and as I approached, I could hear them. My worst suspicion was validated when I peered out the window. On my bed, they were straight there, nude. I turned to leave. I've been resisting the temptation to do something I'll later regret. Right now, I'm having a hard time caring what happens to me. I spent the night in my family's cabin and drank all that was there. I was about to confront her on my way home today, but I changed my mind. I'm not prepared. Anger is all I can feel. Violence is all I can think about. Right now, I'm not in a good enough state to see her. I'm currently back at the cabin. I've spent the last hour gazing at a 60-ounce bottle of rum. I don't want to become wasted and make poor choices, but I do want to get wasted and forget this. I am aware that this is a pivotal time in my life, and that what I do in the days ahead will determine how I live the rest of my days. I am there. I need assistance. I'm contacting strangers because I'm not ready to talk to friends or relatives. F this planet. Edit. The rum will remain nearby for the time being, but I have made the decision not to consume it. My brother is on his way and should be here in a few hours, according to the phone call I made. My wife just texted me to tell me how much she loves me and how excited she is for our trip. I still haven't replied. In addition to my brief update, I wanted to clarify a few remarks and queries that continued to come up. I feel much better today, if you can't tell. The pain subsided almost entirely. Although I still feel like I've been hit in the stomach, I've started to look ahead. I don't think this is correct. Am I just incredibly resilient? Or is this a sign of things to come? To shed some light on the queries and remarks I've received, I've included some cliff notes. When I mentioned wife and best friend, I meant the dual roles my wife and I had in our relationship. I didn't even know the other guy, let alone consider him my best friend. I didn't get a good look at him, but based on my fleeting impression and the fact that I saw his car, I don't think it's someone I know. We are childless. However, we intend to have them shortly. We recently sold our home, and when the new owners move in September, we plan to relocate closer to my place of employment. Like he did for me, I will express my gratitude to my neighbor in a subtle way. After a long work travel, I must admit that coming home to Willow P may be one of the worst things. I sincerely apologize for what occurred to you. As for us, we're just getting started. So grab a seat and let's get started with the first update. My brother and I had a lengthy conversation when he got there. He has been my actual best friend, and I've come to learn that I should never forget that, and that he will always support me without passing judgment, just as I would support him. Despite the fact that we occasionally argue, he truly sets the bar for what true friendship is. I chose to reply to my wife's text yesterday night as I was meant to be at home. It made sense for me to just be texting her because we are not permitted to have phones on the premises. She is aware that I may easily slip in a few texts. I informed her in writing that I would not be able to call her until the end of the weekend because I had to travel to one of my company's remote locations. I informed her that I will reschedule after canceling all of the reservations. I rented a romantic bed and breakfast on the vineyard, and she said she could bring her best friend over this weekend. I was aware that she didn't want me to believe that her best buddy would be attending. Since it was non-refundable, I informed her that I had already given it to my brother and his wife, who would reimburse me in a month. I canceled every reservation this morning, with the exception of the romantic one. I'm going with my brother. Luckily, the hotel allowed us to move from the honeymoon suite to a two-bedroom. This just ended up being a long overdue fishing excursion with my brother, because there is a really great lake and boat rentals close by. I am therefore free this weekend. That reduced my worry and gave me more time to reflect, because I won't have to write or speak to her for a few days. Right now, I'm considering getting a divorce. There's really no other way for me to see it. My brother is in favor of this. However, he has requested me to talk to someone for a few weeks. On Monday, his wife is willing to speak with me through a friend of hers who works as a couples counselor. At least it might help me sort out some of this muddle, but I don't see it changing my mind. In order to at least get ready for what I believe is inevitable, I am also starting to talk to lawyers and taking a lot of advice from this place. I want to do it correctly. I don't think she would try to cheat on me, but I also don't think she would try to do so. So I think I should be ready for anything. That was a brief update, but it gives us a glimpse into the OP's current thoughts. Let's move on to the following update, which is quite extensive and contains a wealth of information. Now let's go on to that. The last few days have seen a lot of events. To go to the Tibetan breakfast on the vineyard, my brother, Matt, and I drove for over 5 hours. I am really grateful that he has supported me during this time. It helped me get my thoughts straight, although it was more of a venting session. Our fishing trip wasn't very successful. The proprietor of the B&B provided us with some food after we both caught a few trout that we had to release because of their size. Those were quite successful. We took a car back to Matt's house on Sunday. He lives almost an hour away from my home in the town next door. Jen, Matt's wife, was waiting for us when we got there, and we all sat and opened a bottle of white wine that was stored in the cooler. For me, the weekend officially ended at this point. Jen informed me that she chose to spy on my wife while we were abroad. She informed me that the man spent the entire night in my house on Friday, but she arrived on Saturday morning, just as he was about to leave. She located the apartment where he resided after following him home. On Saturday night, while she was texting me to tell me how much she loved and missed me, my wife stayed over there. Jen claimed to be dividing her time between stalking my wife and visiting relatives in my town. She claimed to have caught my wife on Sunday morning as she was leaving his apartment and snapped a few photos of them cuddling and kissing before she got into her car. I'd rather not see them. For me, that essentially sealed the deal. If she can so easily go from telling me she loves me and being with another guy, I doubt I could ever trust her again. Nevertheless, I made the decision that I would not react hastily because of my feelings. I must maintain my composure. Jen then informed me that Sharon would be joining us for supper. Jen made an appointment for me with a psychotherapist named Sharon. To be clear, this was my first encounter with my wife, and she has never met her. We got along well, and Sharon was a really pleasant girl. Following dinner, Sharon and I took the dogs for a stroll around Matt's neighborhood, while also having a little private chat. Sharon was quite helpful since she listened well and gave me the impression that I didn't need to be cautious. Being that open about how I felt was therapeutic. Even though I get along well with my brother, this was something new and much needed. I enjoy blogging on Reddit for the same reason. It's a way for me to vent and clear out some of the chaos in my thoughts. The only practical advice Sharon provided me during our hour-long walk was to not put off talking to my wife. It will be more difficult to discuss this with her the longer I wait, she said. She explained that right now, I need clarity more than anything else, and my wife is the only one who can provide it. Jen and Matt invited me to remain with them for as long as needed later that evening. I talked to my manager who was able to arrange for me to live in corporate housing because I'm aware that Matt and I have a time limit on living together. Although I had to leave on days off, I had been staying there every other week for some time. If I needed to, he was able to arrange for me to remain full-time for a few months. Later that week, I made the decision to reschedule with Sharon. For the first session, I thought talking would be enough, and she agreed. I lay in bed all night Sunday, trying to figure out how to go about this. I found this difficult because even the hypothetical situation in my mind made me feel depressed or angry. I made the decision to wing it. Normally, I perform well under pressure. I got up the following morning and bid Matt and Jen farewell. What if he's there when I get home? I asked myself as I drove home. I then reasoned that it would probably only make me feel even more irate than I had been a few days prior. I choose to start with a drive-by. My wife's automobile and his truck were not present. After going inside and gathering a number of necessities and items I didn't want to part with, I proceeded to the man's residence. His truck was there, but so was her car. To find out where she was, I made the decision to write her. "I'm getting groceries," she said. I drove past the grocery shop and verified she was there because I don't trust her at the moment. Admitting that I did that makes me feel so bad, but that's the only way I can be sure of anything, and it breaks my trust. We need to discuss. So I contacted her again and implored her to simply come home. "What's wrong?" She replied in writing. I just replied that she must be prepared to be honest before shutting off my phone. 15 minutes later, she arrived home. As usual, she came over to give me a kiss and an embrace when she entered. I turned my back on her. She repeated, "What's wrong to me?" I therefore advised her to start telling the truth to me. She seemed not to understand what I was talking about. I replied, "Okay. If you can't be honest, then I'm leaving." At this point, she became frantic and asked, "Are you talking about yoga?" I assumed that was a beginning. She told me that she hadn't been attending yoga when I asked her what she was talking about. "Where were you going if you weren't going to yoga?" I asked. She claimed that because she had been so worried lately, she was taking walks to decompress. "What has been causing you so much stress?" And why did you feel the need to lie to me about what you were doing? I inquired. She said she didn't know how to tell me and attributed it to the transfer preparations. I persisted in pressing, saying, "So you decided to lie. Why did you feel the need to let me know that you were taking a stroll to relieve stress?" I responded that I wasn't stressed when she stated she didn't mean to lie and that she was concerned she would be making me feel more stressed. She didn't appear to be telling me everything. "What do you mean?" she asked, looking at me in amazement. "I think you're lying about more than just skipping yoga," I remarked, glancing at her. "I'm asking you to be honest once more. If you continue to lie, this won't work because you have already lied to me." "Oh, are you talking about last weekend when I went for drinks with some friends and came home late?" She followed up on her attempt to deflect by claiming she was at a loss for words. "I sensed something that disturbed you." I didn't know she went out late or drank drinks. I questioned her whether she was lying again or if it was what she actually did while I was at work, a few hours away. She explained that although she went out for drinks that evening, she didn't run into her purported best friend. In response, I inquired, "Who did you see?" "No one. I just drank alone," she claimed. Naturally, I wasn't buying this, and I was getting impatient. I therefore questioned her. "Is that something now? That you are drinking by yourself?" "Yeah, maybe I have a problem," she replied in response. She had one final chance to be honest before I left, so I told her to get to the bottom of her drinking problem. She claims she didn't know what else to say after giving me a glance. I simply got up and walked away. I usually take a drive to keep away from her when we argue. She likely assumed this was the same, but then she noticed that I had taken my Xbox, clothes, and toiletries. She started blowing up my phone at that point. "There's nothing more to say," I told her, because I offered her an opportunity to be honest, and she didn't. She pleaded with me to come home so we could discuss things face to face. She claimed she didn't know what she believed she'd done or why I was so unhappy. She reaffirmed her love for me and her vow to never harm me. I felt a new ache in my chest just listening to her say that. The words were always consoling, and I blindly believed them. It felt like a dull, sharp knife cutting through my heart in the most worst way right now. I hung up because I couldn't take it any longer. Before I was prepared to respond once more, she called back roughly 40 times. "Did you talk to Karen, the best friend?" she asked this time. She responded, "Come home." I don't want to say this over the phone. When I asked why, in order to lower my heart rate, I agreed and continued driving for a little while longer. I then returned home. "I assume you spoke to Karen," she began. She went on to describe how they went out for drinks a few weeks earlier, when I was at work. But I just gazed at her. When a few men began purchasing drinks for them, they simply cooperated. One of the guys tried to kiss her as they were leaving, but she quickly retreated and informed them that she was married. She then expressed her regret and wanted to inform me, but she was a fool and chose to keep it a secret from me. She also informed me that, without asking, Karen provided his friend my wife's number after hooking up with the other guy. Since then, he has texted her a few times, but she has never responded in writing. After all of that, I just asked her to show me her phone, and she did. Other than her mother and me, there were no texts at all. This was new to her because she never deletes her texts. When I investigated the deleted images, I discovered one of a guy I didn't recognize, even though her photos were clean. She told me it was the man who attempted to kiss her when I inquired who it was. "Why did you take a picture of him?" I asked her again. Once more, she placed the blame on herself, claiming that I was just being stupid. I pointed out that it's not a valid excuse and refused to allow her get away with it. I pressed her once more to explain her actions. She claimed not to know. "Is that all you want to tell me, or is there more?" I inquired, growing weary of the whole situation by this point. That was all she could think of, she said. I went out again. I didn't want to face any more hints of the truth. I climbed into my truck and headed out. She tried to stop me as she hurried outside, but I was already out of her grasp. After having my lunch and trying to think of what to do next, I went to the adjacent park and just sat on my tailgate. As I sat there, I started to recall other things I should have known better, like the times I worked a weekend shift and went to bed early. Along with some of her girlfriends, my wife went out to the club. She wasn't home when I woke up at 4 in the morning. I tried calling her several times, but nobody picked up. She called me back about half an hour later to ask if I could come get her. She informed me that they were unsuccessful in their attempt to hail a cab when I picked her up. Her buddy was approached by a pair of men who wanted to stop at home before offering them a ride. Her married buddy entered a room with one of the guys when they arrived at his residence. According to my wife, she looked for her for a long before giving up and waiting with the roommates in the kitchen while enjoying a drink. When I tried to call her, she said she didn't hear her phone. We got into a fight over this, and she ended her friendship with her friend because she was disgusted by what they had done. I assumed that was the end of it. She once made the trip to another city to see a close friend. A scheduled girls' night was held. 4 of the girls were in their pajamas watching movies while intoxicated. That's what I was told anyway. She then gave me a goodnight call at around 1 in the morning. She kept telling me that they were having a nice girls' night during our 20-minute conversation. Then, in the distance, I heard a man's voice. She initially denied hearing anything when I questioned who it was. Then, loudly, it occurred once again. "Oh yeah. Ex-friend took a couple of guys with her," she answered, unable to deny it. "Everyone in this place is furious about it. She was 3 hours away and intoxicated." She forced me to put my trust in her once more. We discussed that as well as her refusal to inform me of their presence. She vowed never to place herself in such a predicament again. That obviously didn't stick. I was prepared to try this one last time, after recalling all of those things and our discussions about them. My phone rang nearly instantly after I switched it back on. She was yelling for me to come home when I responded. I returned home by car. As soon as I stepped inside, she was there, crying uncontrollably. She kept saying, I'm so sorry, while seated on the couch. "What are you sorry for?" I asked her. She started to rock crazily back and forth. She confessed to lying about the man who attempted to kiss her after it took her a solid 5 minutes to collect her breath enough to talk. I asked her to explain what had transpired, after giving her a quick glance. She claimed that that evening, the 4 of them returned to his house and played about. Even though I knew there was more, I felt light-headed simply listening to her say it. There seemed to be a million people talking into my ears at once, and the room seemed to be getting smaller. I believe that I was experiencing a panic attack. To get things back to normal, I went to the restroom and washed my face with cold water. "What exactly did you do?" I asked her again. I forced her to do it even though she attempted to avoid it. She went on to say that she gave him her head after he touched her. Was that it? I questioned her, knowing it wasn't all of it, and she said, yes. At this point, I was furious and informed her that I would no longer play the trickle truth game, and that we would either stop talking or she would have to tell me everything at once. It took her a few more minutes to talk when she started crying once more. She now admits that they had another encounter and shared a bed. Then right away, "I'm so sorry. I will stop at nothing to make up for this, because I love you." Just the one time, I asked her, knowing the truth. If she tells me the truth, I should please give her a chance to do everything she can to make up for it. She continued after pausing. I promised to give it some thought, and now the whole truth was revealed. She acknowledged that it had been an affair for over a month, and that they had been having sex while I was out of town for work. She informs me that he is married, and that their divorce is imminent. "Does he know you're married?" I questioned her. "Yes," she replies. Do you think our marriage is failing if he was having an affair because his is failing? I then questioned. No, I don't think ours is failing, she responds, before going on to say, I'm so dumb. I despise myself. Don't leave me, please. I can make this right. How would you do that? I inquired. And she stated she would do anything I requested. What would fix this for you if you were in my shoes or the shoes of your affair partner's wife? I questioned her. She said that it would be resolved if she knew the truth and could believe that I meant what I was saying. Then she said, I'm trustworthy. I made a mistake and will not do it again. Would you want to know the truth if you were his wife? I questioned her. Yes, she replied. Then fix this, I said. She asked, do you want me to call his wife? After giving me a look, if you believe that's what she would want, I said. She attempted to call but never received a response. Her cell phone rang a couple of minutes later. Karen Work was stated as the name. I knew it wasn't Karen because of the shocked expression on her face. Is that him? I questioned. It was, she said. When I replied, he said, oops. I must have the wrong number, being the coward that he is. No, this is the husband of the girl you have been having an affair with, I said. She has something to tell you, so I'm going to let you talk to her. I handed the phone to her. She claims that she told him the whole truth, everything I know, that they were only having a brief affair, and that he should never get in touch with her again. Before she hung up and asked him, what divorce lawyer are you using? I demanded to see the phone. I'm not getting divorced, he responded. Why did you tell my wife you were? I asked him. I didn't, he stated. I then requested to talk to his wife, since I believed she should be aware of this just as much as I am. Please, dude, he said. I didn't realize she was married. Don't let a mistake destroy my marriage. You ruined mine over a mistake. I shot back. It is only right that I inform his spouse. Since she was at work, he begged me not to tell her, promising to tell her everything when she got home. I hung up after saying, all right, you do that. I then turned to my wife and asked her whether she knew the name and place of employment of his wife. She did. My wife called to let me know she was at work. She managed to get her on the phone and instructed her to sit down. This woman stated she will phone my wife back from her car as she was about to depart for the day. She did. What's going on? Was the first question she asked. My wife informed her that she didn't want to start any mishaps and that she had something awful to share with her. Please don't drive, she pleaded. The wife was obviously alarmed and inquired as to the whereabouts of her affair companion. My wife informed her that he was currently in their apartment and doing well. My wife went on to add, I just wanted to let you know that we have been having an affair for the past month. Since I'm currently coming clean to my husband, I felt you should be treated with the same deference. After a minute or so of silence, the affair partner's wife claimed she would find out who my wife was. If this was some sick joke, she hung up after that. Karen Work texted my wife less than 10 minutes later, saying, thanks, you just ruined my life. I picked up the phone and replied, you just destroyed 2 marriages and 4 lives. Remember that. You bit of junk. You were to blame for this. My wife pleaded with me to stay with her for the next hour. She promised me sexual favors, counseling, and the promise that she would always be by my side. Thanks to the comments, this was just what I expected. Then as a reward, she suggested that we take that trip. She said, we need time away. My work schedule has been separating us lately, so we need to get together and spend some quality time. And just what I thought she would say. I went, but she wasn't expecting me to inform her. Additionally, she wasn't prepared for me to inform her that I already had a counseling appointment scheduled. She most certainly didn't anticipate my telling her that I had slept with her in my own bed. She probably didn't anticipate that I would have a hotel reservation in place. She sobbed on the floor when I told her all of that. She began to complain that she didn't deserve to live. She advised me to break up with her immediately since she is too awful to be with anybody else. That was how it continued for some time. I listened to her justifications for 4 hours straight, during which time she tried to give me a hug, a cuddle, or even a head if I would just remain and work things out with her. When I finally phoned Karen, I informed her that her unfaithful buddy was suicidal and asked her to come watch her. After that, I departed. I haven't spoken to her since that incident, which occurred about a full day ago. All day long, she has been phoning and texting me. All day long, her friends and family have been phoning and texting me. Each one has a different justification or request for sympathy. The only person to write to me was her father, who assured me that he would always love me like a son, no matter what, and that I should act in my own best interests. I had my first good cry since this whole thing started when I read it. My counselor, Sharon, and I have appointments tomorrow and Thursday, respectively. Though I'm unsure of everything until it happens, I believe I know where this is headed. I apologize for the long story. It's just a good method to get things out. Once more, thank you very much for all of the letters and comments. I feel so much less damaged and more hopeful because of the folks who are sharing their own tales like this. I truly appreciate all of your words and actions on my behalf. That concluded the update. Before I offer my commentary, we have one last update regarding this story. All I can say at this point is that I believe the OP did a fantastic job of persuading his unfaithful wife to tell the truth. Final update. Well done, he. Let's proceed to the last update now. It was a pretty eventful week. I've been alternating between my brother's house and camp. I only stay on nights when I have an early appointment, because I want to be as unobtrusive as possible. I've benefited much from my employer's permission to take a few weeks off for personal reasons. I've kept going to see the therapist, Sharon. So far, I've seen her 3 times. Personally, I feel better now than I did a week ago. Therefore, even if I don't think our visits are very fruitful, I do think they're a nice opportunity for me to get some things off my mind. I will therefore continue for the time being. Last Thursday, I had a conversation with a lawyer. I compiled a list of all assets and financial information, including debt, under their guidance. After that, I went to the bank and requested that they put a stop on our account so that no one could take money out of them without the other person being there. This won't prevent either of us from obtaining new money, just the old shared money, because we both have our paychecks deposited into our own accounts. Although it's now too late, the lawyer did advise me to wait to confront her until after I've served her the papers. I was getting calls and texts from my wife, her family, and her friends almost non-stop throughout the entire week. My sister-in-law hosted a family gathering at the cabin this past weekend. I went and had to tell my family the news. Now that it's public knowledge, I can incorporate them into my recuperation process. Up until about 08:00 on Saturday night, everything was going as smoothly as it could be. When my wife's automobile arrived, my dad, brother, and I were gathered around the fire. Matt, my brother, assured me he would handle everything. In order to avoid being seen from the driveway, my dad and I made the decision to take a stroll around the property. I could hear my wife yelling at my brother to move out of the path as we were just about to enter the woodland. She was accompanied by a few of her pals who were also shouting at Matt and urging him to shut up. He tried his hardest, but in the end, they were too much for him. She pushed past him and came running toward us. She must have noticed us going in that direction. I stated I would handle her even though my dad offered to handle it. My wife, who I'll just call Kate, came racing to me and started crying. I didn't stop her from giving her a hug right away, but I also didn't give her one in return. She pleaded with me simply to talk to her. I accepted. And in order to have some peace, we strolled around the property's trails. The other guy's wife has left him, according to Kate. She told me that he blamed her for everything and threatened to kill himself over the phone. She says she hasn't spoken to him since telling him to simply do it. She then takes out a piece of paper and begins enumerating the ways she intends to make amends with me. She provided all of these services on the first day, including sexual requests and couples therapy. And then she surprised me. I don't want to continue living this way, she says. She stated that she wants us to both quit our jobs, go abroad, and open the small beach bar we've always discussed. She claimed that if I accompanied her, she would depart immediately. In order to contextualize this is all that came to mind for the previous week as I tried to picture my life after the divorce. I assumed that everything would have to be restarted. I might as well add another element to the tremendous change I'm currently going through and just do what I want. I was reminded of how much I missed her and wanted to be with her when I heard her express the same desire. I knew I had to cut the conversation short at that point. Her buddies were waiting for her when I escorted her back to her car. I informed her that, although I couldn't guarantee anything more, I would be open to talking on the phone. She felt enough at ease to depart. Since then, we've talked on the phone every night, but it never changes. She sobs and pleads with me for another opportunity. I hung up after becoming upset with her for what she done. Right now, I'm having a terrible time missing her. It's difficult to talk to someone who was my best friend for decades. It is heartbreaking to realize that all of our hopes and dreams have been thrown away. The only thing I want is to simply move and start fresh somewhere else. She wrecked it, even though I wanted that to be with her. She took that away from me. That's all. We only have that information from OP. With any luck, he was able to complete the divorce, relocate to a beach, and open his bar. At least we know that the affair partner received his just desserts, and that he was able to confront his unfaithful wife. I thus hope that the original poster is content with his life and enjoying himself wherever he is, as I wrap up this film, which has already been long enough. In addition, how many of you would like to see a beach bar like the one the original poster mentioned? That is one of my retirement fantasies, and I am aware of it. Am I the asshole for setting boundaries with my son's fiancée and refusing to accept her as a family due to her constant manipulation and pressure? Original post. I, 41, have 2 kids with my ex-wife, 42F, a son John, 22, and daughter Sally, 20. I'm remarried to my wife, 28. I'm very close with my kids. My son is engaged to Abby. She seems nice but has been a bit pushy, trying to create relationships with me and my wife, though she's also awkward with her. Abby isn't close to her family. She told us many stories why, and while some of her complaints don't seem awful, it's not my place to judge, and I didn't live it so I can't know anyway. We've tried to be welcoming, but Abby has forced her way into some family traditions where she wouldn't have been invited, and somewhere no one outside of a specific family would have. She has been calling Sally sis since they were only dating a few months, has an odd sister/mother-in-law thing she does with my wife, and the one I'm not a fan of, wants me to be like father to her. Not because we've clicked or anything. We are very different people. Not saying that in a bad way, just saying it's not based on how we get along or anything. My kids and I have a tradition when they come over, that we have a private catch-up in my office study before they leave, which is now even more important to them, because while they both get along well with my wife, they don't want to have personal conversations around her yet. Abby asked if we could talk, and after I explained the tradition, John later asked that I do it, saying she'd never had a caring conversation with her dad. We compromised that I didn't include her in the tradition, but did join the 2 of them for coffee and let her talk. Then she started calling me dad. They weren't even engaged yet. John pulled me aside and begged me to give her that. Laid this whole thing on me about me always being the dad she always wanted, right in front of her, and she just wanted that. Told me she cried watching me and Sally together. She still gives me random hugs. I'm a lucky dad. I didn't like it, but I do feel bad, so I gave her that. She wants me to walk her down the aisle and the father-daughter dance. I don't want to walk her down, and I walk with a cane, so dancing is hard. At my own wedding, I only danced twice. John is begging for me to do one, preferably the aisle. They came over Sunday. John and I were talking. I thought to address it when AB walked in without knocking, asking if he'd told me yet. I asked what John said she wanted me to say about having a second daughter now in my speech, and how I loved her. I just looked at him. She asked if I do the walk and dance for Sally. I said of course. She yelled, "She's my daughter too," and I said it will never be the same. Sally is my actual daughter. I tried to explain that I'd talk about her being a happy addition to the family, and I love how happy she makes Jack, which I thought was a good compromise, but she started crying. John apologized, and they left, but he called me when they were home, nearly begging me to. Ada, because I won't lie and say I love her, or she's my daughter. Update 1. I had planned on writing this sooner, but life got in the way in a couple of really good ways. But people were helpful and asked for updates, and I have a surprise-free day. So here it goes. On Mother's Day, my kids and their partners go to visit my ex-wife. So it turns out my ex-wife and Abby are a lot closer than I realized. She calls her mom, which is part of where this comes from. Also, apparently, my ex has been egging it on. On Mother's Day, they were talking about the wedding, and I guess, whenever Abby referred to me, it was his dad. My son apparently told her to let it go, which led to yelling. Abby about deserving to be my daughter, ex telling her that she's right, son telling her that I am trying and she should be realistic about things, Sally telling her I only had one daughter, which was apparently a response to Abby saying to her that is my daughters. They should be united. According to my son, Abby was crying. According to Sally, she was crying and yelling and kicked something before going to her room. And Sally told me she went off on her mom, but will not elaborate, so I don't know what was actually said. But knowing Sally, who boy? Around 2 a.m. I got a text from Sally's partner's phone saying, Abby really is great. She hasn't been perfect, but you should give her a chance, and you will learn to love her. I saw it when I woke up. I tried to text her back, but was blocked. So I called Sally, but they were driving. They stopped by my place later that day, because I am on the way, and my daughter prefers my liquor and cooking, and they told me about the night before. At the end, I asked to speak to her partner alone. I asked if I had done something to upset her. She was confused, and I told her I was blocked. She said I wasn't but checked her phone and I was, and I said it was after her message, and she asked what message. I showed her. It was not on her phone anymore. At that point, we brought in Sally and caught her up. Neither of them were happy. A couple of days later, John and Abby dropped by unannounced. Not something we really do in this family, but okay, fine. I had mad salmon. Does not take long to cook. I cooked 2 more, and my wife serves while I make drinks. The entire night was Abby trying to bring up the wedding. John trying to change the subject, Abby not allowing that. We talk logistics, because I am helping them get some good deals through some professional contacts I have. When finally she just says, so I was talking to Mom. She said that you can walk me down the aisle, and she'll do the dance. Or you can dance, and she'll walk. It's your call, but you need to choose soon. I reiterated that I could not dance. She tried arguing that I had danced a little at my wedding, but I made it clear that is different, and did not feel comfortable walking her. She got upset and said, Mom loves me. Why can't you? I felt bad but couldn't lie. I pointed out that she had John who loved her, my ex-wife friends. She had people who love her. She said, but other than ex-wife, those aren't my parents. I said, neither am I. She was very emotional, so my wife and I gave them a few minutes. My son and I were alone later. He looked exhausted. He said the problem was that after Mother's Day, Abby had called Sally and kept saying they are both my daughters, that I did not get to be close with one but not both, and that it was them against me. But at that one, Sally cried havoc and let slip the dogs of war. Things were said, grievances were aired. John had to hang up before it got worse. But I guess Abby was shaken, but there was a new problem. Abby had decided in her head that I did not mean what I have been saying, and was just doing it for Sally. He told me he would handle it. Ron Howard. He did not. So now, I get text messages from Abby every couple of days, acting like we have a secret relationship Sally doesn't know about. She even called herself my secret daughter and lolled. She invited my wife to lunch, saying 2 out of 3 of his girls going out. She has even started using the pressure of showing up at events like a recent barbecue to play a certain image. She hugs me more and holds it, wants to take pictures with just me or my wife and I, but always a few with just me to post with captions I do not like. My wife is getting especially annoyed because of how she is with her. I guess Abby surprised her with Father's Day plans for me that had to be shut down. As it is, she still inserted herself into the day, but she has a soft spot for her, and when Abby gets emotional, she caves. My wife is a sweetheart. I asked him if he was upset with me, and he said no. He just wished it was different. He said we're good, but he's worried he and Sally aren't, which is when I took the advice of some people and suggested premarital counseling. He said he would talk about it. Abby is insisting Sally go to her fitting. That shop should pay per view that potential Royal Rumble, because Sally is not holding her feelings back anymore. I told him Sally loves him, and I'll talk to her. But for now, it is stressful all around. Abby driving my wife crazy with her ideas for what my girls should be doing. Driving me crazy with dad-daughter content. Drove Sally to the edge. And oh yeah, last night, sent me an email with 3 styles of father-daughter dances and song options. So I'm not feeling any more respected or heard than before. The 6 of us have barely been in the same room in order to let things calm down since Father's Day, which was great until it was a shit show. Sorry this is so long. With all the craziness, this is still the abridged version. We are supposed to meet Friday. Sally's partner and I have a bet going about how bad it will go. So onward and upward. I hope you fathers had a less dramatic day than I did, and by any chance, does anyone know exactly how bad of a crime I need to commit to enter witness protection? Just curious update 2. I have gotten requests for updates on my situation, and as I enjoy a refreshing mojito, and my wife her mojito, life feels good, and the perfect time to amuse the world with my pain and familial drama. Plus a cousin of mine who apparently reads these and knows my situation gave me the convincing argument of dude, you can't keep people hanging. And how can I argue with that airtight argument? I apologize for how long this is. A lot has happened. My wife's pregnancy is going well. Keeping her as stress-free and pampered as possible has been my focus. It is such a different experience this time, both because of how much more involved I can be and how much better a relationship I have with my wife than I had with my ex. My daughter Sally has been great. Even her partner has been great, helping with the nursery or driving her around when I can't. My wife doesn't know because it is a surprise, but my son has been building a crib for the baby, modeled after the one I built for him and his sister, to show my wife his support. My son is a good man, and he is still in there. He just has a soft spot for Abby, which I guess gets us to the part of the movie where Godzilla shows up and starts busting up buildings. So I called a family meeting with my kids to talk about the situation. Told John his sister was only doing wedding activities she wanted to, and that the guilting request needed to stop, that this was hurting his relationship with his sister. Sally was happy I said it so she did not have to yet again. I told him if he did not stop her from messaging me, I would block her with a bluntly honest explanation. Why? We got a lot out. John seemed to understand, but then a few days later they insisted on coming to talk. Sally and I decided we would get everything out. So all of us ate at our place. Abby started in immediately about baby shower stuff, and I told that is the kind of thing we wanted to talk about. I told her that I understood she has been trying to fill a hole that she has, that she thought she was getting a father, a second mother. She calls my ex-wife mom apparently, and a sister. I told her it was still possible, but that she needed to start listening to us. I told her that for the sake of family, we would give her a fresh start. If she agreed that moving forward, she would respect our boundaries. My daughter did not love this idea, but loves her brother and was willing to try. Abby tried to say that since we were starting over, we could define what the relationship would be and just be family. We told her we were not ready for that it needs to happen organically. She got mad that I am closer with my daughter's partner, which is true, but we just get along, and that she deserved it for trying so hard. My daughter said something about trying things we actually want. She ran to our bathroom. He ran after her. After a while, I checked on him. I could hear her repeating, "This is not what I wanted." My wife, daughter, and her partner went out to the patio to give them privacy and salvage the night. After a bit, I got a text saying they had just left. I checked in with him the next day, and he said they talked more at home and she understood. For a couple of weeks, things were good. The text stopped, except the occasional wedding question, since it was getting closer. She stopped pushing herself on my wife and Sally, and we thought was involving us in lesson wedding planning out of respect. Since as it was, they only got the venue at the rate they did, because of my professional connections. And they know I was willing to help, but not interested in helping plan, even if I'm good at event planning. But then, I got a call from the venue telling me the card I used had been declined. Now this is a specific card I use for big purchases, because of the miles, so I knew it had a high limit. That was how I learned that they had changed dates by 2 months. Despite being informed, I would still be out much of the money because it was too close to the date. I was furious. I mean, I have been lucky in life financially, but I am not blow-off deposits like nothing wealthy. Called my son. Said he needed to get his ass to the house. Just him. They both came. When they arrived, I opened the door. She actually started with, "Dad?" I think I just replied, "You have gotta be kidding me," and walked toward the table. Abby had the nerve to ask where dinner was. My response was not polite, as I made it clear that was not why they were here. I hoped my son would not lie to me, so I asked what was going on with the venue. She started going into wedding details, but my son interrupted to tell me they postponed because my ex-wife was unavailable because of a surgery, and he had not told me because he was putting money together to pay the lost money himself. And he had just reached out to guests to let them know. And that is when Abby's mouth opened. We have extra time to work on our dance. Now, during this time, my wife came home, and I was walking her toward the bedroom when Abby said that. My pregnant wife with me said, calmly, "I have different feelings about that, and will elaborate further shortly," or something like that. Then I laid my wife down and got her water, turned on her symphonic covers of popular songs, and walked back to the table and said something like, "You are out of your fee and mind. Have you ever been listening?" I made it clear I was done with this nonsense, we all were, and kind of lost it asking she did not hear us last time, because her head was up her ass. She was stunned silent. What a beautiful sound. And looked at me while I, admittedly with little filter, explained what Sally and I thought of our time with her and her attempts to force us to love her without even getting to know us. She started crying and stood up and shouted, "Then what was this even for?" John asked what she meant, if she meant them, and he started to freak out. She was frantic and said she meant delaying the wedding. Because, and I'm pouring another drink to write this, it was a ploy. My ex-wife and her decided if I had more time, I would come around. Apparently, my ex told her not to worry about the money because I am loaded. She has always been bitter. I make so much more than I did when we were married, as if that is out of spite rather than my career arc. I think she did that on purpose, frankly. But she not only told me that lie, she and my ex told John as well. He was distraught, repeating "you lied to me" as she tried to spin it, but he was letting it out about how much he has defended her and covered for her, and she lied to him too. She was defensive and blamed my ex for telling her things and me for being stubborn. She yelled, "Why can't I just call him dad?" And finally, after so long, I heard John respond, "Because he is not your effin' dad." She started crying and something about his being the one that told she could call me that. And he said he told her she might be able to eventually. But he had told her again and again to slow down. She started sobbing and went to sit on her chair, but missed and fell on the floor. Appreciating physical humor to break the tension, I admittedly chuckled and hid my mouth behind my drink. This all led to a lot of sobbing. I said I needed to check on my wife, and as I walked out, she was repeating, "I just want him to be my dad too." I came out, and he was walking her to the door and apologized. I said not to. They left. He came over a few days later and said they had a long talk at home. He even asked her if she would have dated him if there was never a chance of being in the family. He believed her when she said yes, but she admitted I was a big draw as well. I was the kind of dad she always wanted. My relationship with Sally is what she always wanted, and the way she said it gave John doubts that she loves him for him. I talked about marriage counseling, how his mother and I tried it, and while it did not save us, it provided clarity and an impartial voice. I pointed out they both like coming to me, but I cannot be impartial, and if they are trying, then they need to do it for real. Abby texted asking if I was the one who suggested therapy. I responded with, "Does it matter if John wants to?" She asked why it was so bad. She wants to know what I think, and I just said John is the man whose opinion should matter most to her. They fought due to the text. She agreed to the counseling, and the wedding has been postponed. I may have done a dance. So they are in counseling. He said she struggles, but I obviously do not know details. She is pressing for me and Sally to go to a session with her. Sally told her she did not want to hear Sally unfiltered, and I am not interested. Abby has been leaving Sally alone. She stopped texting me except for the occasional general question, which includes some attempt to go deeper. My wife still occasionally spends time with her, because she's very into her pregnancy. More so than I like, but it is my wife's call, so that is where we are. Sorry it was so long, but alcohol makes for a poor editor. Update 3. I was told I should do updates here. People have been asking me to get into what went down on Father's Day and at their mother's house. I have been extremely busy these last few months, but am enjoying my temporary unemployment and thought of this account because of the recent Thanksgiving drama. I will do an update, and then we'll share what happened earlier. Oh, and to whomever made the joke that Abby finally got me to dance. That made me laugh. I shared that with the family. My time has been largely caring for my wife. I tend to dote, I know. We are having a boy. We are really excited, though neither of us really had gender preference. I have raised both, and both experiences were wonderful. Now we are discussing names, who we are going to honor. I thought everything had been quiet, but recently found my wife crying and found out I was wrong. Given how busy I have been with work, and my wife knowing I would be free again once we got into this month, my wife has kept this to herself. Apparently, Abby has been pushing for one Thanksgiving this year. Things have been quiet with Abby. My son said the wedding blowing up woke her up and that therapy had been helping. But then this. My understanding is that while John has been talking less with his mother because of all that happened, Abby did the opposite. From my wife's telling, Abby dropped by one day with my ex-wife. My wife intensely dislikes my ex-wife because of lies she spread about my first marriage ending due to infidelity with her. Despite there being no infidelity and the linear nature of time making it impossible for us to have slept together back then. Before anyone asks, my ex-wife does not actually think there was infidelity. I would get into that, but I am sure I would sound biased. Anyway, my wife looked at our camera app, saw who it was, and called my daughter. Apparently, the two of them were keeping things from me because I was working 18-hour days, and they did not want me dealing with anything else. I wish they had not done that, but I appreciate the thought. I am really lucky to have such caring people around me. My daughter called her mom and said something that made them leave in a hurry. She will not tell me what, but she smiles when I ask. I called John, but he was dealing with some hard work news, so I just was there for him and left the other alone. The next day, Abby came back, alone this time. My wife saw it was her and asked her what she wanted through the door. Abby said to apologize. My wife let her in, she is too nice. And after a nice talk, Abby asked about the whole family getting together for Thanksgiving. My wife said, of course. She assumed as much. A couple of days later in our group chat, we were discussing details. Who brings what? And Abby asks, what else is needed? I say John already committed, and she asked, what about my ex-wife? What should she bring? In the time I have known Abby, she has never made an intentional joke that funny. So I asked what she was talking about, and she mentioned the whole family comment. And my daughter and I both asked what made her think we counted her as family. She actually replied, she is my family. I don't have a dad who wants me, just a mom, and my mom deserves to be with family on Thanksgiving. Sally replied, well, we'll miss you and John then. Abby asks how she can say that. Sally asks how she can be so stupid. John says not to call her stupid, and I say that is fair, but there is no real way she thought my wife thought she meant my ex-wife. At this point, my wife had filled me in. And then, this is so stupid, she uses my son's phone to add my ex-frigging wife to the group chat. She then thanks us for the invitation and asks what she can bring. As I was typing, my daughter beats me to it and asks what she thinks she is doing. She knows she is not welcome, but says it less politely. My wife types, you could not have thought she was included when I said family. Abby responded that she was not coming as my family, but as hers. Sally let her mom have it. She already is not talking to her much, and said if my ex-wife is there, then she is not. I mentioned there was never a chance X was going to come, and said I understand Abby and John wanting to go to their mom's house, so she is not alone. John typed, plans not definite. Will let you know. He has since told me that he is not going to go to his mom's place, but wanted to tell Abby alone first. All I can think about is the comment about not having a dad who wants her, because it means she is still thinking about me as a dad, I believe. Just a negligent one. I mentioned that to my son, and he said he noticed it too and had brought it up at therapy. Because family is such a frequent topic, though I obviously do not know the details. Wow. I thought this would be brief, but that was a lot. I will get into the crazy stories later if there are people seeing this who want me to. I do not know how posting from here works in terms of anyone seeing it, but this has been good to get out. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. Someone needs to explain sunk cost fallacy to John. I genuinely cannot believe he is still with her, after the sheer volume of times she has disrespected him, his boundaries, and your family. Maybe this was back in an earlier post, but has anyone really taken the time to reason with him that there are other women out there and he deserves so much better than this kind of relationship? O.P. I had a talk when this started. So did his sister. After the blow up with the wedding, his sister and I took him out for a game and some time to really talk after. That was when he apparently demanded counseling. I am happy that for now marriage is on hold. At least, he is seeing her a bit more honestly, but is still too optimistic, in my view. OP needs to let his wife know not to let Abby in when he is not home. OP. I have asked my wife to never let her in if I am not here after last time. Well, actually, I had already asked her, but after the last incident, my wife has agreed. You are exactly correct that she takes advantage of my wife's kindness. Though once our boy is here, I think she will be very protective and will hold strong. I have told John that Abby will not be holding our baby, at least for the foreseeable future. Oh, P and his daughter need to have a serious talk with his son about Abby. P. His sister and I had a serious conversation with him a little after everything blew up. It seems to be what inspired both his demand for counseling and putting the marriage on hold. He is better about seeing her honestly. His sister said something about Abby having similarities to their mother, which would have been fighting words from anyone else. And I saw the temper that rarely comes out. But then he listened because she clearly put thought into it. I never thought about it. I am proud to have kids smarter than me. I know my boy doesn't come off as a genius in these posts, and fair enough in that department. But professionally, he is brilliant. She laid her reasoning out in excruciating detail. He listened though because she was not enjoying it at all. It was sincere. Some seem to have clicked because since that talk, he has been different with her. I just am not getting my hopes up. Commenter 2. When two crazies are feeding off each other's crazy, they can start thinking anything is possible. I have a feeling that even if your son leaves her, she's not going to go away peacefully. Her and your ex sound like peas in a pod, unfortunately. P. My daughter really went at him, pointing out their similarities. She made her case well, and thankfully it shook him up.